And that, class, is why you should never, ever underestimate a human, Dr. Vexer concluded, his tentacles waving dramatically as he paced in front of the holographic display. The image of a burly human lifting what appeared to be an entire spaceship slowly faded away, leaving the alien students in a state of stunned silence. Well, almost all of them. Theft. Come on, Professor. You can't seriously expect us to believe that nonsense, chirped Xeric, a Zentari exchange student, whose bioluminescent skin was currently flashing an irritating shade of neon green. I mean, lifting a spaceship, that's physically impossible, even for a, what did you call them, hypersurvivor? The professor's compound eyes narrowed, all 8 of them focusing on the skeptical student. Ah, Xeric, I see your species' renowned arrogance hasn't skipped a generation. Tell me, have you ever met a human? Xeric's skin shifted to a smug purple. Well, no, but then perhaps, Zexnark interrupted, his voice dripping with sarcasm thicker than molluscan slime. You should refrain from making judgments about species you've never encountered. After all, we wouldn't want you to strain that mighty Zentari intellect of yours. The class erupted in a cacophony of alien laughter, a mix of chittering, bubbling, and what sounded suspiciously like a deflating balloon. Xeric's skin cycled through a rainbow of embarrassed hues before settling on a dull gray. Now then, the professor continued, his tentacles tapping away at the holographic controls. Since some of us seem to be having trouble grasping the concept of human capabilities, I think it's time for a more practical demonstration. The students exchanged nervous glances. The last practical demonstration had ended with 3 of them in the med bay and 1 very apologetic Arcturian slug. Don't worry, Zexnark chuckled, noticing their apprehension. I promise this one won't involve any carnivorous plants. Instead, we have a very special guest lecturer today. On cue, the classroom door slid open with a pneumatic hiss. The students turned, expecting to see some hulking monstrosity of muscle and aggression. Instead, they were greeted by, well, disappointment would be an understatement. Standing in the doorway was a human, yes, but not the towering behemoth they'd been led to expect. This specimen was decidedly average. Average height, average build, with a mop of unruly brown hair and a lopsided grin that seemed more goofy than threatening. Hey there, the human called out, giving a little wave as he sauntered into the room. Name's Jack Martinez. I hear you folks wanted to learn a thing or two about humans. The silence in the room was deafening. Even Xeric, usually never at a loss for words, seemed struck dumb by the sheer ordinariness of the human before them. Dr. Vexer, on the other hand, was practically vibrating with excitement. Class, meet Jack Renshaw, a certified expert in human martial arts and self-defense techniques. He's graciously agreed to give us a demonstration today. Jack scratched the back of his head, looking slightly embarrassed. I don't know about expert. I just know how to handle myself in a scrap, that's all. Xeric, having finally found his voice, snorted derisively. This is your mighty human. He looks like he'd struggle to lift a datapad, let alone a spaceship. Jack's eyebrows shot up, his grin widening. Oh ho, sounds like we've got ourselves a volunteer for the demonstration. Come on down, buddy. Don't be shy. The Zentari's bravado faltered for a moment, but with all eyes on him, he had little choice. Puffing out his chest, or what passed for a chest in Zentari anatomy, Xeric made his way to the front of the class. All right, big guy, Jack said, clapping his hands together. Let's start with something simple. I want you to try and grab me. Don't hold back. Give it everything you've got. Xeric's skin rippled with anticipation, shifting to a predatory red. Without warning, he lunged forward, his forearms outstretched to grapple the seemingly defenseless human. What happened next was so fast that most of the class missed it entirely. One moment, Xeric was about to seize Jack in what should have been an unbreakable hold. The next, the Zentari was flat on his back, staring up at the ceiling with all 7 of his eyes wide in shock. Jack stood over him, that same goofy grin still plastered on his face. Not bad. Wanna try again? The class erupted in excited chatter. Dr. Vexer's tentacles were practically tied in knots from his enthusiastic gesticulating. You see, this is but a fraction of what humans are capable of. Xerok, his pride stinging far more than his body, scrambled to his feet. Lucky move, he grumbled. I wasn't ready. Fair enough, Jack shrugged. Tell you what, this time I'll let you get a grip on me before I do anything. Sound good, the Zentari nodded, his skin flushing a determined orange. Once again, he charged forward, but this time, Jack stood his ground, Xerok's forearms wrapped around the human in what should have been an inescapable bear hug. Gotcha, Xerok crowed triumphantly. Not so tough now, AR. YOU-H-OCHI. The Zentari's victory speech was cut short as Jack executed a move that, to the untrained eye, looked like nothing more than a slight shift in posture. Somehow, this minimal movement resulted in Xerok flying through the air in a graceful arc before crash landing on a nearby desk. Oops, Jack winced, looking genuinely concerned. You okay there, bud? Didn't mean to throw you quite that far. Xerok groaned in response, his skin cycling through a kaleidoscope of pain colors. Right, Dr. Vexer exclaimed, his voice pitched higher than usual in barely contained excitement. Now that we've established the basics, perhaps we could move on to a more comprehensive demonstration? Jack nodded, his expression becoming slightly more serious. Sure thing, Professor, but, maybe we should use some volunteers who are a bit more durable. No offense to our friend here, he added, gesturing to Xerok, who was still trying to untangle himself from the remains of the desk. But Professor's eyes gleamed with an almost manic light. Oh, I have just the thing. Computer, activate training scenario Omega-7. The classroom shimmered and dissolved around them, replaced by a stark, featureless white room. Jack whistled, impressed. Fancy holodeck. Hard light constructs, Zexnark corrected proudly. Top-of-the-line Galactic Federation technology. It can create solid, interactive holograms indistinguishable from reality. Cool, Jack nodded. So what's this Omega-7 scenario? The answer came in the form of a low, menacing growl. The white walls of the room flickered and faded, revealing a harsh, rocky landscape under an alien sky. And there, emerging from behind a nearby boulder, was a creature straight out of a nightmare. It stood nearly 3 meters tall, its body a twisted amalgamation of insectoid and reptilian features. Titanous plates covered rippling muscles, while 6 glowing eyes glared balefully from a head adorned with wickedly curved mandibles. Forearms, each ending in side-like claws, flexed in anticipation. Holy shit! Jack's exclamation was cut short as he dove to the side, narrowly avoiding a swipe from the monster's claws. What the hell is that thing, that doctor? Vexer replied, his voice filled with a disturbing amount of glee. Is a Zyraxian war beast berserker. So, one of the most feared warrior races in the known galaxy. This particular specimen is set to extreme aggression mode. Jack rolled to his feet, keeping a wary eye on the advancing creature. And you just keep one of these things on standby for class demonstrations. Oh, no, Zexnark chuckled. Usually the scenario is reserved for our most elite military training programs. Most cadets don't even survive the first 30 seconds. Fantastic, Jack muttered, ducking under another swipe of the creature's claws. Any weak points I should know about? The professor stroked his tentacles thoughtfully. While their exoskeleton is virtually impenetrable, and their regenerative abilities are off the charts. Oh, and they have redundant organs. So even if you manage to damage one, they've usually got a spare. So that's a no on the weak points then, Jack grumbled, narrowly avoiding being impaled on one of the creature's mandibles. Great, just great. The rest of the class watched in horrified fascination as Jack danced and weaved around the Zyraxian war beast attacks. Despite the creature's size and apparent ferocity, it couldn't seem to land a solid hit on the nimble human. Fascinating, Zexnark Moore murmured, his eyes darting back and forth to follow the action. Notice how the human uses his smaller size and greater agility to avoid the Zyraxian war beast attacks. A standard military tactic would be to attempt to overpower the creature, but clearly, David is employing a different strategy. Yeah, Jack called out, slightly out of breath as he ducked under another swing. It's called not dying. Big fan of that strategy. Personally, the Kree-Zexal let out a frustrated roar, its attacks becoming more frenzied. In its rage, it overextended on one of its swipes, leaving itself momentarily off balance. It was only for a fraction of a second, but for Jack, it was enough. Moving with the speed that left the alien students gasping, Jack darted forward, slipping inside the creature's guard. His hands moved in a blur, striking at seemingly random points on the Kree-Zexal's body. For a moment, nothing happened. The Kree-Zexal stood frozen, its arms still outstretched from its last attack. Then, with a sound like cracking ice, its exoskeleton began to splinter and crack. The creature swayed, let out a pitiful whimper, and collapsed in a heap at Jack's feet. The silence that followed was absolute. Even Dr. Vexer seemed at a loss for words, his tentacles hanging limply at his sides. Jack, breathing heavily but otherwise looking no worse for wear, turned to face the class. "So," he said, clapping his hands together, "any questions?" The flood of alien voices that followed was almost deafening. Students clamored over each other, each trying to be heard above the din. Dr. Vexer, having finally regained his composure, raised his tentacles for silence. "One at a time, please," he admonished. "Vixna, you first." A delicate, gossamer-winged creature fluttered forward. How did you do that?" "The Kree-Zexal's exoskeleton is supposed to be impenetrable." Jack grinned, running a hand through his sweat-dampened hair. "Well, impenetrable is a strong word. Everything's got weak points if you know where to look. In this case, I noticed the joints where the plates met were slightly more flexible. Hit him in just the right spots with the right amount of force," and he gestured to the fallen creature, which was already starting to fade as the hologram deactivated. "But that's impossible," another student, a bulbous creature that seemed to be mostly eyes, protested. "The amount of precision and strength required to exploit such minute weaknesses, it's beyond the capabilities of any known species." Jack shrugged. "Maybe for you guys. For us, it's just Tuesday." This set off another round of excited chatter among the students. Dr. Vexer, looking like he might explode from sheer academic excitement, waved his tentacles for attention. "You see, class, this is precisely what I've been trying to teach you. Humans are not just physically formidable. Their true strength lies in their adaptability, their ability to analyze and exploit weaknesses in the heat of battle." "Yeah, what he said," Jack nodded. "Though, honestly, I think the professor here is making me sound way cooler than I am. Most of us aren't going around wrestling space monsters on the regular." This seemed to pique the interest of a multi-eyed, slug-like creature near the back of the class. "Then how did you acquire such skills? Are all humans trained in these combat techniques from birth?" Jack laughed, shaking his head. "Nah, nothing that dramatic. I just took some self-defense classes back on Earth. You know, standard stuff, karate, jiu-jitsu, a little Krav Maga. Oh, and I did a stint in the Marines, but that was ages ago." The blank stares he received in response made it clear that none of these terms meant anything to the alien students. "Right, sorry," Jack said, scratching the back of his head. "Let's just say I picked up a few tricks here and there. Nothing special by human standards, really." This statement seemed to boggle the minds of the assembled aliens even more than the fight itself. The idea that what they had just witnessed was considered unremarkable by human standards was almost too much to comprehend. Dr. Vexer, sensing an opportunity for further education, cleared his throat, or whatever passed for a throat in his species' anatomy. "Perhaps, David, you could elaborate on some of these standard human combat techniques. I'm sure the class would be fascinated to learn more." Jack looked uncertain for a moment. "Well, I'm not really qualified to teach or anything, but I guess I could show you a few basic moves. Any volunteers?" The class collectively took a step back, eyeing Jack warily. After his display with the Kree-Zexal, no one seemed particularly eager to be his training dummy. "Oh, come on," Jack cajoled, his easy grin back in place. "I promise to go easy on you. How about you, big guy?" He pointed to a hulking, rock-like creature near the front of the class. "You look like you can take a hit." The creature, whose name was something unpronounceable involving a lot of grinding noises, rumbled uncertainly, but under the expectant gaze of his classmates, he lumbered forward. "All right, big fella," Jack said, patting the creature's stony hide. "Don't worry, I'm not going to throw you around like our friend Glixer over there." He nodded towards the Centauri, who was still nursing his wounded pride and several other body parts in the corner. "Now, one of the first things you learn in any self-defense class is how to break a hold," Jack explained, turning to address the class. "Even if your attacker is bigger and stronger than you, there are ways to get free. Want to see?" The rock creature nodded hesitantly, its crystalline eyes glinting with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Great, okay, I want you to grab me. Don't worry about hurting me. Just grip as tight as you can." With a grinding sound that might have been a sigh, the creature reached out and engulfed Jack in what looked like a crushing bear hug. Its arms thick as tree trunks and seemingly just as solid, wrapped around the human's torso. "Perfect." Jack's voice came out slightly strained, but he was still grinning. "Now, class, pay attention. Even in a hold like this, there are always weak points." In this case, he shifted slightly, and suddenly, the rock creature's grip loosened. Another movement, and Jack slipped free entirely, leaving his would-be captor looking bewildered. "How did you do that?" The question came from a hovering, jellyfish-like being near the back of the class. Jack's grin widened. "Simple physics, really. Even the strongest grip has points of weakness. You just need to know where to apply pressure." He turned back to the rock creature. "Mind if we try again? This time I'll walk the class through it step by step." The creature rumbled its assent, once again enveloping Jack in its massive arms. "Okay, so first things first," Jack began, his voice only slightly strained by the pressure. "You want to create space. Even a little bit can make a big difference. In this case, I'm going to drop my weight suddenly." As he spoke, Jack abruptly sagged in the creature's grip. It wasn't much, but it was enough to force the rocky arms to adjust their hold. "Next, you want to find the weakest point of the grip. Usually that's where the thumb meets the fingers. Even for our stony friend here, that's going to be a relatively weak spot." Jack's hands moved, seemingly randomly at first, but then finding purchase on the creature's massive digits. Once you've got that, it's all about leverage. You don't need to be stronger than your opponent. You just need to apply force in the right direction. With a twist and a push that looked far too gentle to be effective, Jack suddenly slipped free of the hold. The rock creature stumbled back, looking as surprised as a being made of living stone could manage. "And there you have it," Jack concluded, giving a little bow to the astonished class. Basic hold breaking 101. The silence that followed was broken by a hesitant question from a spindly, insectoid student. But what if the attacker is trying to do more than just hold you? What if they're actively trying to? Well, double quotes, the student's antennae drooped nervously. "Kill you?" Jack's expression sobered slightly. "Well, that's when things get a bit more serious. In a life or death situation, you can't afford to pull your punches. You've got to be willing to do whatever it takes to survive." He paused, looking around the class. "But I want to be clear about something. The techniques I'm showing you, they're for self-defense, not for picking fights or showing off. The best way to win a fight is to avoid it altogether. Understand?" The class nodded solemnly, seemingly impressed by Jack's sudden seriousness. Dr. Vexer, who had been watching the proceedings with rapt attention, chose this moment to interject. "Perhaps, David, you could demonstrate some of these more serious techniques for educational purposes." "Of course." Jack raised an eyebrow. "I don't know, Professor, some of this stuff can be pretty dangerous if you don't know what you're doing." "Oh, not to worry." Zexnark waved a dismissive tentacle. "Our holographic system is more than capable of handling any level of combat simulation. Why, we could recreate an entire battlefield if we wanted to." The excited gleam in the professor's eyes made Jack wonder if that wasn't exactly what the alien had in mind. "All right," Jack conceded, "but let's keep it simple. How about a standard one-on-one combat scenario?" Zexnark's tentacles wriggled with barely contained glee. "Excellent. Computer, Activate Combat Training Program Alpha 3. The classroom shimmered once again, the sterile academic environment replaced by what looked like a seedy back alley on some distant space station. Neon signs and alien scripts flickered on holographic walls, casting an eerie glow over the scene. Professor, Jack called out, looking around warily. What exactly is Alpha 3? The answer came in the form of a low, menacing growl. From the shadows at the end of the alley emerged a figure that made the earlier Kree's Exel look positively cuddly by comparison. It was vaguely humanoid, but that's where any resemblance to a person ended. Its body was a mass of corded muscle and armored plates, with wicked-looking spikes protruding from every joint. Its face, if you could call it that, was a nightmare of fangs and glowing red eyes. Meet the Dreadnought Titan, Zexnark's voice echoed from somewhere above. Bred for combat in the gravity wells of gas giants, capable of surviving in the vacuum of space, and rumored to be able to punch through starship hulls with their bare hands. This simulation is set to, oh my, what? Jack asked, not taking his eyes off the advancing monstrosity. What's it set to? Well, Zexnark's voice had lost some of its earlier enthusiasm. It seems in my excitement I may have accidentally set the difficulty to maximum. Jack's eyes widened. Maximum? What exactly does that mean? The Vornax answered for him, letting out a roar that shook the holographic surroundings and charging forward with terrifying speed. Oshi! Jack's curse was cut short as he dove to the side, narrowly avoiding being flattened by the creature's massive fist. The blow struck the ground where he had been standing, leaving a sizable crater in the holographic pavement. Okay, Jack muttered, scrambling to his feet. This might be a problem. The Vornax spun with a speed that belied its massive size, its glowing eyes fixed on Jack with predatory focus. It charged again, this time swinging both fists in a devastating hammer blow. Jack waited until the last possible second before dropping into a roll, passing between the creature's legs. As he came up behind it, he lashed out with a kick aimed at the back of the Vornax's knee. It was like kicking a steel girder. Jack felt the impact reverberate up his leg, but the Vornax didn't so much as flinch. It turned, a sound that might have been laughter rumbling from its fanged maw. Right, Jack grimaced, shaking out his foot. Note to self, don't try to outmuscle the muscle monster. From somewhere above, he could hear the excited chatter of the alien students, mixed with what sounded suspiciously like betting odds being exchanged. Great, no pressure or anything. The Vornax attacked again, this time with a flurry of punches that would have put a jackhammer to shame. Jack weaved and dodged, his earlier display of agility paling in comparison to the acrobatics he was now forced to perform. Even so, he couldn't avoid every strike. A glancing blow caught him on the shoulder, sending him spinning into a holographic wall. The impact knocked the wind out of him, stars dancing in his vision. David, Zexnark's voice called out, tinged with worry. Perhaps we should end the simulation. I fear I may have overestimated. No, Jack interrupted, pushing himself back to his feet. No, it's fine. I've got this. The Vornax stalked towards him, clearly savoring what it thought was its impending victory. As it drew closer, Jack's eyes darted around, taking in every detail of his surroundings. Then, just as the creature was about to strike, a grin spread across Jack's face. "Hey, ugly," he called out. "You know what your problem is. You're all brawn and no brains." The Vornax paused, cocking its head in what might have been confusion. Then, with a roar of rage, it charged. This time, Jack didn't try to dodge. Instead, he stood his ground, hands held out in front of him, as if he was preparing to catch the charging beast. The alien students gasped collectively. Surely the human hadn't gone mad. There was no way he could hope to stop the Vornax's charge. But at the last possible moment, Jack dropped to the ground and rolled. The Vornax, unable to stop its momentum, tripped over him and went hurtling forward, straight into a holographic power conduit on the alley wall. The resulting explosion of sparks and energy was spectacular. The Vornax convulsed as holographic electricity coursed through its body, its roars of rage turning to squeals of pain. Finally, with a sound like a dying generator, it collapsed to the ground, twitching feebly. For a moment, there was absolute silence. Then, as Jack got to his feet, brushing off his clothes, the classroom erupted in cheers. The holographic alley faded away, replaced once again by the familiar classroom setting. Dr. Vexer materialized next to Jack, all 8 of his eyes wide with amazement. That was ... double quotes for once. The verbose professor seemed at a loss for words. Jack shrugged, wincing slightly as he rotated his bruised shoulder. Like I said, it's not about being the strongest. It's about using your environment, thinking on your feet. Oh, and a healthy dose of dumb luck doesn't hurt either. The students crowded around, bombarding Jack with questions and exclamations of awe. Even Xeric, his earlier skepticism completely forgotten, was looking at the human with something approaching hero worship. All right. Zexnark finally managed to regain control of the class. I think we've all learned a valuable lesson today about the capabilities of humans and the importance of adaptability in combat situations. Now, are there any final questions for our guest? A tentative appendage was raised near the back of the class. It belonged to a small, timid-looking creature that seemed to be mostly eyes and fluff. Yes, Blixnar, Zexnark acknowledged. The fluffy alien's voice was barely above a whisper. Mr. Jack, sir, you said earlier that what you showed us was normal for humans. Jack nodded, more or less, yeah. I mean, I've had some extra training, but nothing to out of the ordinary. The alien's eyes, if possible, grew even wider. Then what are the extraordinary humans like? Jack opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. After a moment, he chuckled. You know what? I think that's a lesson for another day. Wouldn't want to spoil all the surprises now, would we? As the class buzzed with excited speculation, Jack turned to Dr. Vexer. So, Professor, how'd I do? Think your students learned something today? Zexnark's tentacles were practically tied in knots from excitement. Oh, most assuredly. In fact, I was wondering if you might be interested in a more permanent teaching position. I'm sure the Academy would be thrilled to have a human instructor on staff. Jack laughed, shaking his head. Thanks, but I think I'll stick to my day job. This was fun and all, but I don't think I'm cut out for full-time teaching. Besides, he added with a wink, I wouldn't want to put you regular instructors out of a job. Gotta leave some mysteries for the students to uncover, right? As Jack made his way towards the exit, the students parted before him like a sea of alien flesh and appendages. Just before he reached the door, he turned back to address the class one last time. Remember, kids, he said, his tone serious despite the twinkle in his eye. What you saw today, that's just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to humans. We're full of surprises. So the next time you meet one of us out there in the big bad galaxy, he grinned wide and just a little bit predatory. Try not to underestimate us. It might just save your life. With that parting shot, Jack gave a jaunty salute and sauntered out of the classroom, leaving behind a group of thoroughly mind-blown alien students and one very excited XNO biology professor. As the door slid shut behind him, Jack could hear the classroom erupt into excited chatter once again. He chuckled to himself, shaking his head as he made his way down the corridor. Humans, he muttered, a smile playing on his lips. Can't live with them, can't live without them, hey. But damn if we don't know how to make an impression. And with that, Jack Martinez, ordinary human and extraordinary badass, disappeared into the depths of the Alien Academy, leaving behind a legend that would be whispered about in reverent tones for years to come. After all, in a galaxy full of wonders and terrors, sometimes the most amazing thing of all is a simple human being armed with nothing but wit, skill, and a healthy dose of audacity. Humanity, fuck yeah, indeed.